Our Monday night groups are getting bigger. That's great. So, let's see, who's here for the very first time tonight? Who over here? I didn't see the hand. Okay. At the end, we'll have you just tell us your names, but welcome. But we're not going to give you a test or anything. So I thought this would be, since this is a bigger group than we usually have on Monday night, we can do a kind of a discussion, a question and answer. Sometimes we don't get through many questions. Sometimes we get a little bit sidetracked with our questions and our answers. But it's always great. So my voice is kind of giving out on me a little bit, so I'd like to give you part of the work. So if you have any, we've been talking about the precepts. For those of you who typically come, we have a precept ceremony in October, so we start about literally 6 months ahead of time. So half the year, talking about the precepts, because they are such an important part of the Buddha's teachings. The concept of the precepts is living a virtuous life and a harmless life. So you're not doing harm to yourself or to anyone else. And it's really, the more I study the precepts, the more mind-boggling that idea becomes in my own mind. Just how different the world would be if we all were completely harmless to anyone else or any being, an animal, anything living, and if we were completely harmless to ourselves. I just keep reading Sutras where the Buddha talks about it, and that's kind of remarkable. So the precepts give us a lot to work with that is kind of life-altering and world-changing. But we just take it on for ourselves, and that's what changes people's lives. So you can ask a question about the precepts, or you can ask anything that your heart desires within the realm of this world. Or if you have a comment you'd like to make, it doesn't have to be a question.
I've always wondered, you have people come to you and they give you situations that they encounter during the day, and you counsel them on stressful situations. That must build up inside of you. But what do you, after 2 or 3 days, is that stressful for you, and how do you relieve that kind of stress, or is it not stressful? If somebody cuts you off, you honk at them, you have a tendency to honk back at them, but the Buddhist way is not to do that, not to return unkindness. I can feel it building up in me by the end of the day. I'm kind of upset. How do you deal with that in the Buddhist way?
I don't, usually if I'm talking to someone because they've asked if they can talk about something going on, it's usually really uplifting, because maybe that person just needs to talk about a situation. And sometimes I get as much out of what they're talking about as they get from anything. I'm kind of more listening, and I might have something I recommend that they might read, or something that just maybe an idea to think about that maybe doesn't seem like they've thought about. But usually it's kind of insightful for me just to listen to them. So I think the longer I keep doing this, the easier that part gets. And then sometimes if I feel overloaded with stuff, I just kind of stay away for a while. I'm not as available. But that's hard to do. It's hard to be unavailable when you're a monastic.
So you separate yourself from the person's situation and use the art of listening just as a therapy?
Well, it's not really therapy because we're trying to, if someone has a problem, is maybe just see if there might be there might be a teaching or a way that they could relate more to reality differently, like maybe be more aware of how they see, how they perceive things. But it's not a lot. It's not like what I do notice. There's some people who just, it's kind of constantly the same thing, from year to year, and there might be a point where I'd reach where I'd say, when you're ready to take some action, let's talk again, or when there's some change. But usually it's just a matter of listening to people, and they see when they're talking what's going on with them. So and sometimes they just need to say some things out loud to check it out. Just have someone who's listening.
So they formulate what they're going to say, they say it, and then they hear it, and that somehow helps them.
I think sometimes, that's probably how some people would like to do it. That's how as they're saying something out loud, they might sort of see. You know how you sometimes say something and you think, oh, I just really listened to myself. I just heard what I was saying. And then it doesn't make a lot of sense when they say it out loud. And that might be all they need, is just to say something and then think, well, that doesn't make any sense. And rethink it. I don't know if it helps people that much, but
yeah, it does.
It's the one thing that we can be for each other. It's that being a noble friend, that you're honest with someone, and you try hard not to feed into whatever their story is, because if you're really good friends, you don't encourage. If you see something that's really doesn't sound right, well, you try not to encourage that. So it's the same way we would be a noble friend to someone. There's no magic to it, I meant to say. So it's just trying to be, we can't tell anybody the answer to something. And so usually it's more listening than anything else. Letting them hear themselves. But I don't find that it wears me down. That doesn't wear me down, because those are people that are just, when people are ready to talk to somebody, they usually they've got some insight, but they just want to run it by somebody. But sometimes the situations people are in are really sad, really difficult. And that can be, but you can pick up a newspaper or turn on the radio and you hear about situations that are really sad. So, yeah, I don't know what other people would say.
And how are you practicing equanimity when you want to be sympathetic and have empathy?
Well, I think maybe we can have equanimity and still be sympathetic or empathetic. We can share a moment with someone who's going through something that's been really hard for them. But that doesn't mean we've lost our equanimity. That's that person. Equanimity is having the quality that, and it was this group who the person had that great definition from the dictionary, that equanimity is being able to to be that person people turn to in a crisis situation, the person who's level-headed. So that doesn't mean you can't have empathy with someone, especially if you know, or compassion for that person. But you don't lose your head in that situation, because they're looking for the person with the level head. They're looking for someone who can hear their deepest sadness, who's not going to walk away from it. You know, there's some people who don't share things that are deep in their heart because they found maybe that other people, you know, it's like, you know, they don't want to hear anything that's really deep because they don't know how to handle it. So if we're practicing compassion and also working on equanimity, it's being able to handle all that and realize this is part of that, this is part of this world. That's a good question, though. Those are good questions.
Is there something you do throughout the day that kind of helps you recenter yourself, if you're feeling sad or anxious or things like that just kind of help bring you back to that normal shift?
For me personally, if I have something I can read, and we've talked a little bit about gratitude. And the group I teach in Elkhorn, we've been talking about it a lot. So we have assignments to have a gratitude journal. And sometimes what I found is if I start thinking about, okay, and I'm not writing in one, but I'm thinking about what I would write in it, it has really helped me to think about what so far today, what do I have to be grateful about? And it's almost humorous because I realize it's little bitty things that we're grateful for. You know, even if it's a crummy day or I'm down about something, if I think about what do I appreciate or what can I be grateful for about today so far, and it might be that I had a really good cup of coffee, or I read an article that really had a great point in it that I wanted to think about, or listen to some chanting, or I like to listen to Buddhist teachers on YouTube, a few that I really like, and that always kind of lifts my spirit. Or just have a conversation with a friend that's where we can laugh together. Just little tiny snippets of what's gone on in the day. Maybe I have a little tiny coffee pot, so maybe I made the coffee just right, just the way I like it, and it was a really good cup of coffee. So, and then I start thinking there are more and more things. So once I get started on it, I could fill a sheet of paper, and that's like maybe at 11 o'clock in the morning. So I'll just be chuckling, thinking there'd be a lot of stuff if I was writing all that down. And then that seems to be, lately, that has really been something that brightens my mood. Can be silly things too. Silly is good. There's a funny thing, and the monks do this, and some other good friends I have send like gifts. Send GIF. You know, what do you call those? Yeah. So and we work really hard to send the funniest ones, that we can. So it's and we always compliment each other if it's really good, if it just hits the mark perfectly. So it can just be something that made me laugh. I laugh a lot with those, and my kids will send those. My son especially. We just text. We don't talk that much, like, mouth to mouth talking. So we'll send each other silly things that we find online, and then we get into a little conversation with symbols or gifts. So And those are delightful. They're just little silly things, but then you realize what a good sense of humor, like all the monastics have and the other good friends I have in the Sangha and my kids have. I'm so proud of the fact that both of my kids have what I consider a well-developed sense of humor. So those are fun things for me. It's pretty silly.
I think last week you gave a dharma talk on growing older and how you change and what you do when you're young and how your views change when you get older. What was the takeaway from that?
I gave a talk about that?
Mm-hmm. You said when you were younger you valued going places and doing things where as you got older it was being more comfortable, more thoughtful. You don't remember that? That was Saturday.
That was Saturday? Okay. Too far back. On Saturday I was talking about the retreat I'd gone to the day before with Ajahn Brahm. And then later at lunch somebody told me, that retreat was 2 days ago, not. So I'd already forgotten which day of the week it was. I was talking about the way I see Ajahn Brahm is he's really seeing, he's presenting to us like how joyful and happy it can be to be a Buddhist. Not so that's probably that's what I was talking about. And how different that is from being that real serious, like the scholarly person who has to make sure everybody's got the right details or the right take on everything. So when I see Ajahn Brahm now, I think his stories, you've heard most of them 100 times if you watch him on YouTube. But I could see how just delightful, how much he enjoys telling those stories, and people who've watched him probably more than I have even are still laughing at his stories, and his robes are falling off of him, and he has absolutely no, modesty about that. But he just embodies someone who's done all the work to be in the position he's in now. And he's just reminding us all that we can be that kind of a person and still be, we're still on the same path. But he's lighthearted and he's travels all over the world and he manages to stay always kind of upbeat. And I think that for me, that's a wonderful image to see, because I'm sure, as many times as people will, whenever he does a talk, I'm sure there are hundreds of people, thousands of people maybe, who say how great it is. And then there are going to be all those other people, especially on, sites like YouTube and other things, who are going to say negative things about it. And I don't think that bothers him at all. And I think that's pretty wonderful. So I think that's what his message is now. And he's about my age, so yeah, I think it's good to be more lighthearted than it. This is definitely a spiritual path, and the Buddha always talked about keep striving, be diligent, persevere. You just keep getting up. You just keep getting up and starting all over. But we can do that with lots of joy and laughter in our lives. And if we have good Dhamma friends, good noble friends, they're doing the same thing. So we can be laughing with each other when we see, oh, you did the same thing. One of these days you're going to get it, right? And we can all enjoy just being in this adventure together. So I hope that's what I remember about that talk. As you get older, you become more in the second because your memory fails so quickly.
Memory failure. 5 precepts, I'm just like focused on their right speech one because it's a 24-hour job for me. The other 4, I laughed the other day as I went out here because I was thinking, I chose right speech because the other 4 were so easy for me personally. But now that I see how hard right speech is, I don't think anything's easy. Can you run through the 4 for the 5 people, please?
Okay, the first one is it's literally in Pali, not to kill any living thing. And so that means it's often, we talk about it like to do no harm, to sell for others. And the second one is not to take anything that doesn't belong to us. And I keep having different things that come up about that too. And the third one is about not to engage in sexual misconduct. And that can also be like in like overdoing just sensual pleasure. But not to engage in sexual misconduct. And the fourth one is not to is right speech, not to tell a lie, not to tell an untruth. And the fifth one is not to become intoxicated in order to lose mindfulness, like not to become intoxicated on drugs and all kinds of alcohol. Because we don't want to be we don't want to lose our minds. We want to be mindful. So that's a really important one. So those are the 5.
Well, one time you were talking about right speech, not just lying. I thought, oh my goodness, you killed me. Because you were talking about
the range.
Yeah.
Yes, see the first.
The gossip, just the words that come out of my mouth, are they worth saying? And I think one time you said, what if you just don't say anything?
Just don't talk.
It goes at the range, yeah.
Well, in the first 5, it's not don't tell a lie, don't tell an untruth. It's when you do the 8, then it picks up, then it adds not to lie, not to use harsh speech, not to use malicious speech, and not to engage in idle chatter, which is what we love so much. That's what so many relationships consist of. So we have to do, but remember it's a gradual path. So you don't take the precepts after you've succeeded in everything. You take the precepts because these are the guidelines that you're going to work with. These are the things that are going to help you not get too spread out in all the different, myriads of things. The things that the Buddha talked about over and over again, living a virtuous life, because the rewards are so great. So if you live a virtuous life, which includes those 5 things, you are happy. And this is what Ajahn Brahm talked a lot about at the retreat. He talked about how wonderful it is when you follow the precepts, when you live that life where you don't have remorse or guilt or regret, and you're really able to be like silly like he is. You're able to be lighthearted. You're able to sit down when you want to meditate, and very quickly, with practice with that, very quickly you become calmer much faster. You can go into a meditative state much more easily because your mind's not full of things that you worry about or that you stress over because did you make the right decision? Did you say the right thing? Did did somebody get mad at you because of something you did, or did you hurt somebody? And so that's why the precepts are important, and also if we're living virtuous lives, we're doing that for us. but it's like metta, it's like loving kindness. It radiates out from us. So the people we come in contact with, the animals, the people, the beings we can't even see, they love that because they feel safe around us. People feel safe around us. We're not going to intentionally hurt anybody through careless speech or through any of the other things we're watching. So it just becomes, and if we all stand close together, we've got a whole bubble over us, right, of harmlessness and people respecting themselves and then also respecting all other living beings. So the speech stuff will come. We're all working on that one. I mean, I'm working on that one, and I'm sure most everybody in here would probably say, yeah, speech is so intrinsic to being a human being that, I mean, you can open your mouth any time and stick your foot in it, right? So, yeah, Mary.
Notice the difference in how children react versus how you speak to them and how you present something to them. They react totally different.
Yeah, very much so.
That's where you can really feel what you're doing. You're speaking calmly, nicely, even if you're disciplined, they react differently.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I really picked up on it.
Yeah, because you've got grandkids.
I've noticed it, but I noticed I'm more aware of it now. In the past couple of years, they'll listen more if you're quiet.
Yeah, if you think about that harsh speech and also being sarcastic with children and things that we sometimes will do without thinking too much about it, but because sarcasm is really hard for, that sarcasm is difficult for most people to deal with. But yeah, children are they're great teachers.
Show you what you're doing it right, in a sense.
Yeah, by their reaction, yeah. Uh-huh.
In regard to right speech, what do you do in a scenario where you're asked a question and you don't want to lie, but to tell the truth would be damaging to another person's character?
The truth would be damaging to the person who's asking you the question.
Somebody unrelated. Because you don't want to lie if you're asked like a direct question of what do you know about this or what do you know about that. But to tell the truth in that situation could be damaging to somebody else.
Well, the Buddha talks about if you're in a situation where, like if you're in court and you're asked a question, or if you're in a situation where you're asked specifically a question, that you should tell the truth. So if it's in a court or at a board meeting or something, you should tell the truth. But you also have if you're just talking to other people, you have the option of being silent. Yeah, and just don't say anything, or just say, I don't really think I can talk to that. And that's hard if it's just in a kind of casual conversation and it's hard if we know something but we know we shouldn't be talking about it. Yeah, silence is often the best recourse for so many things. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Okay.
That's kind of what I thought.
Yeah. Silence is good. Okay, we have used up the time. Thank you.